He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens.
Have you ever felt that strange weight of being surrounded by people but completely alone inside? Or noticed that even having everything around you, something within you just screams silence? Isolation doesn't choose when to arrive. Sometimes it knocks on the door like a crisis. Other times it settles in slowly, like a shadow that gradually takes over. But what if I told you that this frightening emptiness might actually be the beginning of something profound? What if isolation isn't a punishment, but an invitation for you to finally find out who you really are? When the world around us stops making sense, when conversations seem empty and commitments lose their shine, something inside us starts to stir. It's not depression, it's not laziness, it's not being dramatic. It's the soul asking for passage. And it can only speak when the outside noise diminishes. Isolation creates that space. Forced or chosen, it opens a door we spend our whole lives avoiding. Because on the other side of that door, there's no party, no likes, no applause. There's you. Raw, real, unfiltered. In this video, we're going to understand how isolation can be the most powerful laboratory of your inner transformation. We're going to talk about shadow, about alchemy of the soul, about dreams that return, about silence that heals. We're going to dive deep into this experience that many fear, but which can be the key to awakening something true in you. Because the soul doesn't grow in noise, it needs withdrawal, darkness, pause. And it's exactly there, where everything seems stopped, that true transformation begins to happen. There are people who spend their entire lives running from being alone. They turn on the television, mess with their phone, go out, drink, work too much, anything to avoid facing the silence. And it's not out of malice. It's because inside there lives a bunch of stuff we don't want to see. Fear, sadness, anger, shame, regret. Everything that's been swept under the rug over the years. But life has a curious way of placing us exactly where we need to be. And when isolation arrives, whether through a change of city, a breakup, an illness, a loss, or even a conscious choice, it pulls that rug away. And then there's nowhere to run. What was hidden starts to appear. And that hurts. It hurts a lot. Because it's uncomfortable to look inside and realize that we don't know ourselves as much as we thought. Carl Jung, one of the greatest scholars of the human mind, said something that still moves us today. What you don't face within yourself returns as destiny. You know that situation that repeats in your life? That relationship pattern? That type of problem that seems to chase you? Many times this happens because there's something inside you asking for attention. And isolation is one of the most direct ways the soul finds to scream. Look at me. It doesn't arise for no reason. Of course, sometimes it comes from outside, from circumstances we don't control. But even in these cases, there's something symbolic happening. It's as if the universe, or your own psyche, were creating a scenario where you're forced to stop and look inside. Because while you're in constant movement, in the hustle and bustle, in infinite distraction, the soul stays silent deep down. But when everything stops, it finally has space to speak. And what it has to say can change everything. Now the question is isolation a symptom that something is wrong, or is it a call to something greater? The answer is, it can be both. There are people who isolate themselves because they're moving away from themselves, running from the world, creating walls. That's defensive isolation, the kind that imprisons. But there's another type of isolation, which is more like a retreat. It's when you realize you need time away from chaos to reorganize yourself inside. That isolation doesn't distance you from life, it prepares you to truly live. The difference is in the consciousness. If you're isolated and feeling like a victim, trapped with no way out, it's important to seek help, talk to someone, get moving. But if you feel that this moment of solitude is showing you things about yourself, making you think, feel, question, then it might be that you're living through a process of awakening. And that, however painful it may be, is sacred. When we're truly alone, without the world's distractions, something strange happens. The masks start to fall. That version of you that smiles at work, that posts happy photos, that pretends to be fine, that tries to please, disappears. Because there's no audience, there's nobody to impress. And then, what's left? What's left is you without emotional makeup. And that can be scary. because often we discover that we don't know who we really are. We spend so much time playing roles that we forget who's behind the performance. Isolation takes away the stage, and in that emptiness, parts of us that were forgotten start to appear. That old dream you abandoned, that anger you never expressed, that sadness you never cried, that part of you that was rejected in childhood and that you learned to hide. All of this comes back, and it hurts. But it's precisely in that pain that the soul begins to awaken, because it was asleep beneath all these false layers. And now, finally, it has space to breathe. There's an ancient concept from alchemy called negrito. It's the black phase, the moment of total darkness in the transformation process. The alchemists believed that before transforming anything into gold, it was necessary to go through chaos, through decomposition, through symbolic death. You can't skip this stage. You can't go straight to the happy ending. Before being reborn, you must die. And deep isolation is exactly that, a psychological negrito. It's the moment where everything you thought was solid begins to crumble. Your certainties, your beliefs, your identity, everything collapses. And that's terrifying, because we spend our whole lives building an image of who we are, and suddenly all of that turns to dust. But the alchemists knew one thing: without this death, there's no real transformation. You can change cities, jobs, relationships, but if you don't go through the negrito, you'll continue being the same person, repeating the same patterns. Isolation puts you in this dark phase on purpose, not to destroy you, but to dissolve what no longer serves you, so that something new can be born. And it's precisely in this darkness that you find the shadow. This is a profound concept from Jung. The shadow isn't evil. It's not the devil. It's not something to be eliminated. It's the part of you that was rejected, repressed, hidden. They're the aspects of your personality that you learn to deny because someone said they were wrong. Maybe it's your anger, your sexuality, your laziness, your envy, your ambition, your fragility. Everything that didn't fit the image of what you should be was thrown into the shadow, and it lives in the unconscious, controlling you from behind the scenes. You react, explode, sabotage yourself, repeat mistakes, and don't understand why. It's the shadow acting. But in isolation, without distractions, it appears. It visits you in obsessive thoughts, in nighttime fears, in memories that return, in disturbing dreams. And the first reaction is to try to run away again. But if you have the courage to look at it, to sit with it, to ask what it wants to tell you, something incredible happens. You begin to integrate these parts. And when you integrate your shadow, you become whole. You stop projecting onto others, stop sabotaging yourself, stop living on autopilot. You wake up. There's a phrase from Jung that's harsh, but liberating. Suffering should not be avoided, but welcomed as part of the individuation process. Individuation is the name he gave to this path of becoming who you really are. And he said this path isn't easy, isn't comfortable, isn't quick. It involves pain, because growing hurts, changing hurts, facing the truth hurts. But it's a fertile pain. It's a pain that generates something. It's not the pain of trauma that paralyzes. It's the pain of childbirth that brings new life. When you're isolated and feeling too much, crying for no apparent reason, feeling anguish, emptiness, despair, it might seem like you're getting worse. But actually, you're feeling. And feeling is being alive. Our society teaches us to numb ourselves. Take a pill, drink, distract yourself, occupy your mind, don't think about it. But the soul doesn't heal with anesthesia. It heals with presence. With you being there, truly, feeling what needs to be felt. Isolation intensifies this. It forces you to feel. And in this, however strange it may seem, there's a kind of psychic fertility. Something is being prepared inside you. Something is germinating. We live in a society that worships noise, productivity, movement, hustle, constant connection, digital presence, always being available, always busy, always on top. Silence has become synonymous with failure. If you're not doing anything, you're wasting time. If you're alone, you're a social failure. But the truth is the opposite. The soul doesn't grow in noise. It needs silence, darkness, pause. Think of a seed. It doesn't germinate in the light on the surface. It needs to be buried, stay in the dark, alone, protected. And it's down there in that womb of earth that it begins to sprout. Isolation is that. It's the symbolic womb where a new version of you can begin to be born. But society constantly pushes you outward, toward artificial light, toward the stage, toward performance. And in this, the soul withers. It doesn't have space to breathe. That's why so many people feel empty even while being full of things. Because the soul is starving for silence. And isolation, however scary it may be, offers exactly that. A space where nothing external defines you. Where you can, finally, germinate. One of the most interesting things that happens in isolation is the return of dreams. Many people living on autopilot don't even remember their dreams anymore. They wake up, grab their phone right away, enter doing mode, and the dreams disappear. But when you're isolated, when the rhythm slows down, when silence settles in, dreams come back with force. And they come back loaded with symbols, with strange images, with messages that seem to make no sense. Jung said that dreams are the language of the unconscious. They don't speak in clear words, they speak in symbols. A house can represent yourself. Water can be emotion. An animal can be a repressed instinct. And in isolation, the unconscious takes advantage to send messages, because finally you're paying attention. If you start writing down your dreams, you'll notice patterns, repetitions, themes. And these themes are trying to show you something. Something about you that the conscious mind doesn't want to see. Paying attention to dreams during isolation can be revealing. They guide you. They show you what's asking for transformation. They connect you with deep layers of your psyche. And that, by itself, is already a type of healing. And it's not just dreams. In isolation, many people feel a creative impulse they haven't felt in years. The desire to write, to draw, to paint, to play an instrument, to make something with their hands. And this isn't random. Creation is a form of dialogue with the unconscious. When you create, you're translating the invisible into form. You're giving body to something that exists inside you, but has no words. Jung saw art as a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, between the ego and the self. Self, for him, was the true center of the psyche, the deepest core of your being. And this core doesn't speak in logical arguments. It speaks in symbols, in images, in sensations. That's why creation is so important. It allows you to access this center. It doesn't matter if what you create is beautiful or ugly, technical or amateur. What matters is the process. The act of creating is, in itself, therapeutic. So if you're isolated and feel the desire to write a text nobody will read, to paint a canvas nobody will see, do it. Because you're not doing it for anyone. You're doing it for your soul. And it needs this expression. There's a turning point that happens at some moment in this process. It's when the soul that was asleep finally wakes up. And when it wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep. There may be relapses, moments of forgetting, but something essential changes forever. You realize that the external world is fragile, temporary, uncertain, that the things you thought were solid are just temporary constructions. And then you begin to seek internal roots. You stop depending so much on external validation, on success, on approval, on external security, because you discovered that there's something inside you that's more stable than anything out there. That's awakening. It's not enlightenment, it's not perfection, it's not the absence of pain, it's consciousness. It's you waking up to your own existence in a deeper way. And isolation, however painful it may have been, was the catalyst for this. It forced you to look inside. And in there, you found something real, something nobody can take from you. And that transforms everything. Many people confuse solitude with emptiness. They think being alone is being without anything. But the truth is the opposite. Being alone is being full of yourself, full of your conflicts, your memories, your pains, your potentials. The problem is that we weren't taught to sustain this density. We were taught to empty, to distract, to relieve. But the soul asks for the opposite. It asks for presence. It asks that you stay there, with everything that's happening inside you, without running. Learning to sustain this density is an essential part of the process. It's like learning to breathe underwater. At first, it's uncomfortable, scary. You want to surface all the time. But gradually, you discover that you can stay there, that you can handle it, that you're bigger than you thought. And when you learn to be present in your own company, without needing distraction, without needing escape, something in you matures. You become a true psychological adult, because you no longer depend on emotional crutches to exist. You're self-sufficient. There's a powerful symbol that appears in various traditions, the hermit. In the tarot, he's represented as an old wise man who moves away from the world carrying a lantern. This lantern symbolizes consciousness, the inner light he found in darkness. The hermit didn't isolate himself because he hates people or because he's weak. He isolated himself because he understood that true wisdom doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. He needed to withdraw from the world's noise to be able to hear the voice of his own soul. And after hearing it, he returns. But returns transformed. Returns carrying a light that can now illuminate others. That's the path. Isolation isn't the final destination. It's not for you to stay alone forever, hidden from the world. It's for you to go through a process of internal gestation and then return. But return different. Return with roots, with consciousness, with presence. The hermit carries the lantern precisely because he no longer needs the light from outside to know who he is. He found his own light. And when you find yours, you become a reference for yourself. You stop wandering lost, guided by external opinions. You have an internal compass. And that changes everything. When you accept isolation instead of fighting against it, something changes. Solitude stops being a condemnation and becomes solitude. And solitude is something else. Solitude is the ability to be well with yourself. It's transforming time alone into something sacred, instead of something to be desperately filled. There are people who spend their entire lives running from their own company, because when they're alone, anxiety comes, anguish, despair. But this happens because the person hasn't been introduced to themselves yet. They're afraid of who they'll find in there. But when you go through the process, when you face the shadow, when you embrace your pains, when you integrate your rejected parts, solitude stops being scary. It becomes a refuge, a place where you can truly rest. Because you're no longer performing, you're no longer trying to be someone. You're being, simply being. And that's deeply nourishing. The awakened soul begins to cultivate this space as a sanctuary, a sacred place inside you where the world's noise doesn't enter, where you can reconnect with what really matters. And from this place you can live in a truer way. Because you have somewhere to return to. You have an internal home. One thing that helps a lot during isolation is rituals. I'm not talking about complicated esoteric rituals full of rules. I'm talking about small gestures you repeat with intention. Lighting a candle in the morning. Writing 3 pages by hand before sleeping. Walking in silence for 15 minutes. Having tea while looking out the window. These rituals work as anchors. They organize the internal chaos. Because isolation can be very emotionally messy. One day you wake up fine. The next, you're destroyed. There's no logic, no predictability. But if you have rituals, you have support points. You have something that repeats, something that structures the day, something that reminds you that you're taking care of yourself. Jung saw rituals as symbolic forms of communication with the unconscious. When you make a gesture with intention, you're telling your unconscious, I'm here, I'm present, I'm taking care of myself. And the unconscious responds. It calms down, organizes itself, opens up. That's why simple rituals have so much power. They create a bridge between you and the deeper layers of yourself. And in isolation, where everything can seem meaningless, having these ritual gestures returns meaning to everyday life. Each candle lit is a reminder that something sacred is happening. Each page written is an encounter with yourself, and that sustains. In the silence of isolation, there's something else that begins to manifest. The connection with the invisible. Call it whatever you want. Intuition, spirituality, divine presence, collective unconscious. But something greater begins to be perceived. When the world cools down, when the voices from outside diminish, you can hear whispers that were previously inaudible. You have insights out of nowhere, perceptions that don't come from logic, certainties that have no rational explanation, and you feel you're not alone. Not in the sense of having someone beside you, but in the sense of being connected to something greater than yourself. This isn't madness. This isn't escaping reality. It's actually being more present in the invisible reality, which is as real as the visible one. Spirituality stops being an abstract belief and becomes lived experience. You don't need to believe in God or energy because you feel something working inside you, through you. And this brings a type of comfort that no external company can give. Because you realize you're inserted in a larger web, that you're part of something, that you're not lost in the void. And this changes your relationship with isolation. It stops being abandonment and becomes sacred withdrawal. But the process doesn't end in isolation. This is an important thing to understand. The goal isn't to become a hermit who runs from the world. The goal is to go through isolation, and then return. But return transformed. The alchemists didn't seek to make gold to become rich. Gold was symbolic. It was the purified, integrated, awakened soul. And what they wanted was to live in the world being that gold. Not to escape life, but to live life in a more conscious way. After going through deep isolation, you return to the world different. You don't return as a cog in the machine, functioning on automatic. You return as a living center of meaning. You relate to people in another way, because you no longer need them to feel whole. You work in another way, because you no longer seek external validation. You love in another way, because you no longer project your needs. You're whole. And when you're whole, you can truly be present. You can give without emptying yourself. You can receive without drowning. And that's real transformation. It's not running from the world, it's inhabiting the world in a truer way. If you're going through a period of isolation now, whether by choice or by circumstance, I want to tell you something. Don't fight against it. Don't treat it as a bad phase that needs to pass quickly. Treat it as a laboratory, a sacred space where something essential is being worked on inside you. Breathe deeply. Welcome whatever comes. Cry if you need to cry. Scream if you need to scream. Write, draw, create, dream. Pay attention to the symbols that appear, to the thoughts that repeat, to the memories that return. All of this is showing you something. And if you have the courage to look, to sit with all of this without running, you'll come out of this process transformed. You'll discover parts of yourself that were asleep. You'll integrate shadows that were sabotaging you. You'll find an internal strength you didn't even know you had. Isolation isn't a curse, it's a calling. And if you answer this calling with presence, with courage, with intention, it can be the beginning of a truer life. Isolation is the laboratory of the awakened soul. It's where real transformation happens. Away from the spotlight, away from distractions, away from masks. It's a space of fertile darkness, of silence that speaks, of solitude that teaches. And if you allow yourself to go through this consciously, you don't come out the same way you entered. You come out more whole, more rooted, more alive, because you touched something real inside you. Something nobody can take away, something no crisis can destroy. And that's freedom. Freedom to be who you really are, without depending on the world to validate your existence. If this video touched something in you, if you felt these words spoke to what you're living through, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. That way you help me continue bringing deep content about soul, psychology, and transformation. And if you want to go deeper on this path, learn concrete practices of inner alchemy, and work with the archetypes that live in you, check out the ebook Alchemy and Archetypes. There you'll find exercises, reflections, and tools for you to sustain this awakening process in a real and sensitive way. Thank you for being here. Until the next video.